Starts Monday, August 30th.
For over a month as we tape, we have seen the assault on the downtown section of West Beirut by Israeli military forces. And the intensity of this military engagement has, not surprisingly, created more than just a stir within the world community and most especially within the United States. Jews, passionately supportive of Israel, find themselves divided. Meet three Jews who are displeased with the decisions made by the Israeli military establishment. Rabbi Balfour Brickner is religious leader of Stephen Wise Free Synagogue in New York City. You object to what? The intensity of this military engagement? How would you characterize your misgiving?
I think it's been counterproductive. I can understand how the government of Israel wishes to secure its northern border, and I don't think anybody really would object to that and to the wiping out of terrorist infiltration across the northern border of Israel. But once it begins to move into a situation where you bombard West Beirut and pummel it into dust, you're now in a totally different kind of a ballgame as far as I'm concerned.
You wouldn't bomb downtown Beirut then at all?
Well, it's more than bombing downtown Beirut. Now what it's become is almost a destruction of the downtown part of the city. And one wonders whether or not that facilitates the security of Israel.
Well, do you have a military strategic misgiving, or is there a moral misgiving you're expressing?
Well, I have a moral misgiving. I'm not a military strategist.
Well, but you're telling us that you don't think it'll work, which sounds like a military conclusion.
Because I don't think that you can destroy the PLO by destroying it militarily. It was already destroyed militarily. The PLO is a psychological phenomenon. It will probably continue to exist long after you've destroyed it militarily.
In addition to the regular ticket holders of our program, we have asked a number of leading Chicago area Jewish figures to be with us today, not all of whom agree with the points just made by the rabbi. Who's first? What troubles you about what he said?
Well, I think that it's a misguided view. The whole purpose originally was to secure the borders. Nobody who lived anywhere near Kiryat Shmona would disagree with that, and the rabbi agrees with that, I believe. When they came into southern Lebanon, they found an enormous store of weaponry, an enormous store of ammunition, enough ammunition to supply a 120,000 man army. Right. And they felt that at that point, if they just stopped, that it would have wasted the whole effort, and it wouldn't have come to be.
How do you feel about that, Mark Bruzonsky, associate editor, Worldview magazine? You're also a consultant on Middle East affairs. The PLO is a military force to be reckoned with. These are not drugstore cowboys. These are people who are well armed, and we have the testimony here of a gentleman who says that the evidence is clear that they have more than just statehood in mind.
Well, Phil, the fact that the PLO had arms in South Lebanon, we knew that before the war. It was no shock. The fact that Israel could defeat the PLO militarily is also no shock. In fact, the greatest surprise is how long it has taken the Israeli forces to engage the PLO. But what we haven't discussed,
They were so concerned about civilians. They didn't want to hurt people. They have had so many times that they have had to be concerned about human life. And many Israeli soldiers have been killed trying to protect civilian people.
Is your suggestion that the PLO is hiding behind civilians?
That's certainly true, and they've shot people who have tried to leave the area. Israel has asked people to leave.
And you see that as an act of cowardice?
I certainly do. And terrorism. And
let's accept that. If a soldier hides behind a woman's skirt, that's a rather cowardly thing to do. But is it necessarily brave to drop a bomb which kills both?
If people have been warned to leave, and they have been warned to leave, then
you're sorry about the death of the innocent civilian, but this is what you have to do.
I think that it's certainly true that the PLO have tried to hide behind civilians all the time, and they've got one very simple solution. If they have been defeated, why don't they just say, we stop, we surrender, we give up?
Why doesn't the PLO do that?
Why doesn't the PLO do that?
Gail Pressburg, why doesn't the PLO do that? You're assigned to the Middle East desk for the American Friends Service Committee, and you likewise share the concern of a growing number of people in this country regarding Israel's military engagement in Lebanon.
Well, I certainly can't speak for the PLO, but the PLO seems to be seeking a solution to achieve self-determination, a state, a homeland, a passport, a flag for its own people. It certainly has been defeated militarily. There's no question about that. The question is whether the leaders of Israel and the leaders of the Palestinians will sit down at the negotiating table, and both sides have got to do that. And I don't see Mr. Arafat moving toward negotiations with the Prime Minister of Israel or vice versa
So therefore,
at this moment.
Well, and he's also on record on more than one occasion as committing his life to the destruction of Israel. That certainly would seem to lend credence to the kind of aggression that Israel has undertaken now.
I don't believe that the PLO is committed to the destruction of Israel.
There's a real point being missed here. You talk about the PLO and the right to exist, and I think, first of all, you ought to differentiate between the PLO and the Palestinians. But if you're looking for a state and where the PLO have been, it's called Southern Lebanon, and for the last 7 years, they have perpetrated a reign of terror in Southern Lebanon, the likes of which the world has never seen. I was there. Were you there?
I was there last October.
In October. I was there last month in the midst of this.
Phil, could we talk for a moment about the political dimensions of this?
Right.
Because the political dimensions are really what's important. You may have been in southern Lebanon last month on a tour guided by the Israelis. Many of us have traveled the Arab world. Last August I was in all of the Arab countries. Could I have just a minute while you've had yours? The political motives of this war are what most of us object to, far beyond the debate over how many casualties, how many civilians, how much terrorism. Israel has a policy on the West Bank. That policy is gradual incorporation of the territory, neither to allow full autonomy, as in Camp David, nor to allow statehood, as many people believe the Palestinians deserve. In fact, many American Jews believe that, if you look at current opinion polls. So the point is that we object, I believe all of us object, we know each other, to the political motives that have caused Israel to try to kill Palestinian nationalism. The PLO is the symbol of Palestinian nationalism, and anybody who travels in that area knows that the Palestinians say that.
I don't know how you can say that. The Palestinians are differentiated from the PLO. If the PLO really represented the Palestinians, why doesn't any Arab country recognize and really want to take them in? That's because the Palestinians...
The PLO is a member of the Arab League.
Every Arab country at this point has agreed to take them in.
It's true, though, they've had very little support from the Arab community in this entrapment.
That's true. The motivations are complex. We can get into it if they'd like.
First of all, I think we want to be careful not to get in the wrong argument. People that stand up here or sit up here the way we do end up sort of defending the wrong element. We're not defending the military aggression of the PLO. Nobody in his right mind would want to do that. Certainly no Jew would want to do that. The question is, how do you achieve peace in the Middle East? That's the first question that you have to ask. The second question that you have to ask, basically, is whether or not it is possible for any element of the Jewish community to disagree with the policies of the present Begin administration and still be anything other than a disloyal or a self-hating Jew.
How do you feel about that? Is it possible to disagree with the military strategy of...
What military? Political strategy.
All right,
political. The whole strategy. The strategy of the Begin government.
So you don't bring a sort of a suggestion of disloyalty to the state because of the objective?
Well,
I
let's see if we
think
finish some of it.
it's a level of naivete, but not disloyalty. I really don't think...
Is it really naivete to say that the policy of the Begin government since 1975 has been to annex the West Bank and that this is counterproductive to peace in the Middle East? Is that naivete, or is that a matter of disagreement? Well, look, I don't want to be labeled. I don't want to be labeled by funny kinds of labels, and I don't like being called naive. You can tell me I'm wrong or that you disagree, but you can't say to me without being challenged that I am naive merely because I happen to think that Mr. Begin's policy of annexing the West Bank is mistaken. And to call it Judea and Samaria when before it was called occupied territory, and every Jew in the world was content to call it occupied territory until Mr. Begin changed the language and began to call it Judea and Samaria, is not naive. That's a matter of political and social...
Is the caller there? Is the caller there?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir, briefly.
Yes, very briefly. Just two things. First of all, there was just a question just raised now about this business about the West Bank. As a professional historian, I can tell you that the West Bank is a false notion. This is Jewish territory that was grabbed by the Arabs in the 1948 war. That's an aside. My major comment is this business about blaming Israel for the destruction of Beirut and of Lebanon. This is nonsense. Israel came right to the borders of Beirut. They could have taken over, they could have destroyed the PLO had they wanted to. Instead, they acquiesced to the wishes of the United States government, probably vis-a-vis Hague. Once they acquiesced to that, the American government turned around and propagandized the issue and stopped Israel. Israel
Stopped Israel from what?
from going in and finishing off the PLO once and for all.
Finishing them off when?
When they first got to Beirut.
A month ago?
A month ago. Israel stopped because Israel was looking for peace at that point.
All right, so it's the United States pressure that stopped the original encroachment that is justifying the bombing?
Of course, and now what's happened is everything has been so propagandized that the PLO begin to look like heroes when in fact they're the ones who are responsible for the destruction.
What stopped the...
You want to stand for just a second? Let's what?
What stopped the invasion into Beirut isn't U.S. pressure. What stopped the invasion into Beirut was the fact that the Israeli military establishment knew they would lose hundreds of Israeli lives, and that there are thousands of Israelis demonstrating...
That's the same argument we use in Vietnam. We've already got our boys, as we refer to the young men we sent to die for the decisions made by older men. Once our boys are there, Margaret Thatcher had the same problem in the Falklands. Once their boys were at the island, then anything goes because we've got to protect the lives of our boys. So that why can't we back up for a moment and at least try and rationally discuss whether or not our boys or their boys or anybody's boys should be in a particular spot in the first place?
I don't think they should. I'm just saying that the reason that Begin didn't go all the way is because he was afraid he was going to lose political support at home. And there are hundreds of thousands of Israelis that have been out in the streets that have been against this war.
Does it bother you that a hospital was hit? Does it bother you that children are injured in this kind of...
On one of our local radio stations, it said that a Red Cross ship was bombed. The implication was that Israel had done it. The next day, it was stated out that it was never reported, but the PLO bombed the Red Cross ship.
The PLO bombed it?
The PLO bombed the Red Cross ship.
Yeah.
I'm an Israeli who participated in the war in Lebanon, just came here recently, and I hear all kinds of nonsense here, which, well, I have seen with my own eyes how PLO fighters occupied orphanages and hospitals and put anti-aircraft cannons on there.
And blew up school buses.
Who blew up the school bus?
The PLO is accused of having done.
I can tell you stories for 3 hours.
All right. So their atrocities are worse than your atrocities. So as long as we get ourselves in...
You can't equate...
It's not a matter of comparing it.
Once they are capable of planting a bomb in the company of civilian...
After of 7 years of PLO terrorists attacking northern Israel and attacking the Lebanese in southern Lebanon, that they had to be cleared out, that there had to be a way to get out of the terrorists so that you could free southern Lebanon and free Israel, northern Israel, of those bombings.
Doesn't it trouble you, though, that we don't have someone with the courage to rise above this carnage and say, for the sake of your children and my children, let's start talking about this? And do you really...
I think it's...
Do you really...
I think it's
Do you
important.
believe that the PLO is going to suddenly go away? And does it trouble you that you've really martyrized these people? They will have great stories of courage to tell their grandchildren about how the great weight of a superior force, but nevertheless we stood strong and firm, and now on and on goes, I'll throw a bomb, then you throw a bomb.
I think you should know that...
Meet Rabbi Harold Smith, president of the Chicago Board of Rabbis. You wanted to say what, sir?
I think you should note that since 1948, when the Israelis were attacked by so many armies, they were the ones that said this is a time to talk and not to fight. And all of the Arab countries refused to talk and insisted on fighting. And then they kept bombing and shelling Israel across the borders and killing its citizens. Now, I want to ask you I'm not going to make a speech. I have many things to say, but I'm not going to make a speech. I want to say, with reference to what you said about what the PLO bombings, many of us heard last week the son of Billy Graham on a national hookup, also a reverend, I think his name is Reverend William Graham, and he said that he was personally present. He was an eyewitness when the Israeli soldiers started to shoot down upon some of the the PLO headquarters, that they turned around and instead of shooting back at the Israelis, they turned around and killed many Arab and Lebanese children and took pictures and sent that over. And some of these are the pictures that we saw here in America.
Over here.
The PLO doesn't have self-determination. It has the sense of destruction. They put their units in the hospitals, in the churches. The Lebanese were there to welcome Israelis, to save them.
So we fixed that by bombing everything.
That's right. And as Golda Meir said, and you probably all heard this on TV, when the PLO and the Arab world love their children as much as they hate the Israelis, then we will have peace.
Question.
Hang on just a second. Let me try one more here. Is the caller there? Hi.
Hello.
Briefly.
Okay. I'm an American of Lebanese descent. I lived in Beirut for a while, about 10 years ago. And a few very brief points. First of all, Lebanon's an unwilling host to the PLO and would be far, far better without them. But the problem is, just like a bank robber takes some people hostages, do the Israelis have a right to go into a nation that is an unwilling host and obliterate a city?
They say yes, because of the threat to their own well-being, because of the proximity of the PLO in southern Lebanon.
100,000 invading Israelis using arms that legally they're not allowed to use in an offensive action, attacking 6,000 PLO in a city of 500,000.
And they want you to tell that to the grieving Jews who have lost loved ones at the hands of the terrorist PLO. Now what?
Are we comparing numbers?
So is that what? Will that be our criteria then? Whoever kills the most people is the worst person. Is that what our country?
The criteria is: does one nation have a right to chase bandits into another nation? A nation that has never warred against it, has no defense, and because the bandits, the terrorists, every bad name you want to label them, I go with.
Well, the
do they have a right to, because these Palestinians all of a sudden have no place to hide, they go to orphanage trying to save their own lives, do they have a right to sit out at sea and bomb the orphanages? The point is, you can't attack another city.
You can if somebody's threatening your mother in that other city.
Well, as far as I know, unless Israel intends to take Lebanese territory, Beirut is not a threat to Israel.
But the presence of the PLO is.
Okay, fine, but do you have to kill 500,000 to get at 6,000 Palestinians?
I am a Lebanese here.
The point is, we've got a sovereign nation, the capital of a sovereign nation.
What? Hang on a minute.
Then why don't they expel them?
Well, how do you do that? I mean,
how can they expel them?
Well, what does he say? Expel them.
How?
Well, you're a Lebanese. You tell me.
That's the point. The Lebanese don't have an army. The Lebanese are merchants. They're bankers. Okay?
Phil,
they don't have an army. They don't have the power of Israel.
Meet a fellow country person here. Yes, ma'am.
I am a Lebanese, and the real Lebanese, we would like to say that to the American people. The Lebanese are the only victims in Lebanon, really. For the last 7 years, the PLO and the Syrians have been shutting Lebanon, have been killing the Lebanese, and there they are. The media and the press, they didn't say anything about it. And all of a sudden, they raised the question about the PLO that they have been killed in Beirut. What about the 100,000 Lebanese that have been killed by the PLO?
So your position is what, then?
They destroyed my country, they destroyed our people, and there they are, defending the PLO here.
And then you're sitting next to the president of the Chicago Board of Rabbis, who wants you to know that his countrymen are threatened by the presence of those people in your city, and he has no interest in injuring you or anyone you love in that city, but he's got to do something to remove what I assume he might call a cancer within the municipality of Beirut.
I'm not giving any credit to the Israelis, but the Israelis were threatened by the PLO. We were threatened by the PLO too. Both countries want peace.
Lebanese, a Muslim Lebanese?
It doesn't matter. The Christians and the Muslims have the same point of view.
It doesn't matter in Lebanon whether you're a Christian Lebanese
just
or Muslim?
we want to be left alone.
Why is there an East Beirut and a West Beirut if it doesn't
We want the Syrians out, we want the PLO out, and we want the Israelis out.
Yeah.
Excuse me just one second.
But it does.
Is the caller there? Is the caller there?
Yes.
Briefly.
I would like to know, this is a matter of conscience, and that is, how can the Israelis condone and
approve of?
Yes, approve of killing or trying to exterminate the PLO after what happened in World War II with the Nazis. I want to know how they can do that. That's not right.
The Israelis are saying to you that this is one of the historic incidents that will that they are ensuring will never be repeated because of this kind of display of determination.
Wait a minute. Hold it. Wait. When the Nazis tried to wipe out the Israelis in war, or the Jews in World War II, they thought they were going to be ending all the Jews, and that was wrong. You can never do that to anyone, and it is never, ever morally right.
But what?
To try to...
To lose and sit by passively.
Well, I don't understand your point. That the Holocaust then helps you understand this kind of Israeli maneuver?
Yes, absolutely. You've got to defend yourself.
Phil, can we answer your question?
Hang on just one second.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, ma'am, you'll stand.
It seems to me that everybody seems to be in unison that the PLO is doing nothing except terrorizing the Middle East. We have them down and running, so is it now a good time to eradicate them and get them out of everybody's backyard?
Eradicate them?
Eradicate them?
Excuse me, but how do we know... You want to stand for just a second? And remember, the PLO membership wants you to know that they are entitled to their own nation. And they feel, subject to the strong disapproval of many of the people in this audience, that their opportunity for statehood has been usurped historically by the Jews. All right? That's our first problem. They will tell you they have no interest in hurting anybody's child, but that channels haven't worked. And the only way that they could communicate with the world community about the desperate condition of their own refugees was through violence. And they want to stop, but they want the opportunity to have their own homeland. And you're standing up on national television to say, let's eradicate them. There's all kinds of questions there. First of all, how do we know when they're eradicated? I mean, how do we tell who's who? And who do we shoot?
But all the peaceful negotiations that have tried to go on have always been muddled by the PLO. They say that Israel does not have the right to exist as a nation. Don't they have a right to defend their country land and be clear of this threat to the Middle East?
Doesn't this go back so far, though? Doesn't this go back so far? I mean,
my history book will be argued against your history book. My memory of an atrocity will be argued against your memory of atrocity, and we will go on forever killing children because of our inability to resolve this.
I think we're making a very serious mistake in not differentiating between the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which is a terrorist organization, and the Palestinians. To combine the two, to combine the problems of a Palestinian homeland, or to combine the problems of
an idea that you would support.
PLO,
is that right?
An idea that we should discuss, but an idea...
So we don't have your support of that yet.
To talk about the PLO in the same breath as the Palestinians is a terrible disservice.
On that.
You'll forgive me for this break.
Something?
I'm sorry, I have to break. I thank you for your contribution, and we hope you'll join.
My one wish for the future, to feel young forever. Of course, to feel younger, you must also look it. So I use oil of Olay, and I'll never stop. Oil of Olay enlivens my skin, helps it look fresh and smooth, so it feels very soft. And I can feel younger, whatever my age.
Discover the secret of Oil of Olay. It can help you look younger, so you'll feel younger, too.
Kids never give up.
Kids are kids. Kids are kids, it's true. Kids will do things only kids will do. And moms are moms. They know what's fun for kids.
Maybe Mom will make us some Kool-Aid.
Kool-Aid unsweetened and my sugar gives them fruity flavors and vitamin C. Besides, soda's about 3 times the price.
That hits us fun.
Moms know Kool-Aid is the one for kids.
Kool-Aid brand soft drink mix. Dieters, trying to lose weight? Cutting down on food may mean you're cutting down vitamins important for metabolizing fats and carbohydrates in your diet. Introducing On Guard, vitamin formula with Biostan for dieters. What is Biostan? It's On Guard's combination of biotin and other B-complex vitamins important for metabolizing fats and carbohydrates. Look good and stay healthy. And when dieting, look for On Guard. Vitamin formula with Biostan for dieters.
On Guard is available now at these fine stores.
Me? I love the sun, but I don't go out until sundown.
People all over are discovering one of the healthiest ways to face sunup is sundown sunscreen.
We don't go out until sundown.
Sundown is specially made to help protect against painful sunburn and premature aging caused by the sun's damaging rays.
And I don't go out until sundown.
So whatever you do, for healthier skin under the sun, don't go out until sundown. From Johnson & Johnson.
When I was your age, Punkin, there were trees everywhere. But people got careless, and every year they started forest fires, and all the trees burned down. Then the birds died. Because without trees, there's no air, so everything dies.
Grandpa, I wish I could bring back the trees for you.
once-in-a-lifetime experience. The most dazzling extravaganza that's ever been brought to the stage.
I'm flying.
Peter Pan. The smash musical that will never grow old. Now see the Broadway sensation that keeps critics raving and audiences cheering. Peter Pan. You'll leave the theater flying.
Peter Pan at the Warner Theater, August 17 through 29. Call now, 626-1000.
These are just two full or half-page ads which give you some sense of the division existing regarding opinion as provoked by the incursion into Beirut by Israel. We cannot be silent, say, more than 100 Jews who signed this document, which in effect says, among other things, we are American Jews who are appalled by the Israeli invasion of Lebanon and by the fact that the killing and destruction are being carried out with the political support and military aid provided by the United States. The signatures of more than 100 Jews. Organized labor appears to be foursquare in Israel's corner. The AFL-CIO is not neutral. We support Israel, said the highly regarded, very powerful labor organization. Let me, is the caller there? Hi.
Hi.
Briefly.
I am not at all anti-Semitic, but I am definitely for the Palestinians. And I was wondering what the panel felt about the terrorism on the West Bank, the way they torture people on the West Bank, the way they...
Who?
The Israelis do.
You know that, do you?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
I have met people who have been tortured on the West Bank since they protest the treatment of people in Lebanon.
Yes. But first of all, these people here gathered want you to know that they believe there's a significant difference between the PLO and Palestinians.
Okay, I'm talking about treatment of the Palestinians.
And is there any, do you have any feeling?
Let's talk to that. I don't want to talk to the issue of torture for a minute, because that's a bad phrase to get into.
I've seen people who've been tortured. There is documentation.
Let the rabbi in here for a second.
But I think one of the problems that many of us are concerned with is precisely this, the future of the Palestinians on the West Bank. 1.3 million people live on the West Bank and Gaza. And I think what's disturbed a lot of Israelis, not just a lot of Jews who happen to sit in Chicago or some other place, but a lot of Israelis and a lot of Jews throughout the world, is the treatment of those who live on the West Bank who are Palestinians and who are not Israeli Jews.
And what is your assessment of that treatment, Rabbi, briefly?
I think it's, in the last 5 years it's deteriorated.
Deteriorated, meaning terrible?
I think there's a conscious effort on the part of the Begin government to annex the West Bank.
And how do you feel about the removal of Arab mayors who were duly elected?
Well, all 5 of them. I think the Millsong, the introduction of Millsong, the village
village leagues,
the village leagues are all part and parcel of this plan that the Begin government now has to reduce the possibility of full autonomy on the West Bank, as was guaranteed by the Camp David Accords.
Yes. The record should show that the Israelis support what's happening now by, according to some polls, as much as 80%. We have seen demonstrations of disapproval, but it's 80-20. Israel is saying, go to it, Mr. Begin.
I think you're absolutely right, Phil. I think that the Israeli population...
We're talking about Lebanon and not the West Bank.
Yeah.
I think the rabbi ought to concentrate on Lebanon and not on the West Bank.
But there are those who believe that the reason for the invasion into Lebanon was to facilitate the annexation of the West Bank.
Hang on just one second.
Let's discuss that. I think that. I think there are a lot of Israelis
You
that
think
think
what?
that.
Let me catch up with
The
you.
reason for the entrance of Israel into Lebanon was because of the constant bombing of the PLO of northern Israel.
There was a ceasefire.
No, that's not what I said at all.
And the constant destruction of southern Lebanon, of the Lebanese people by the PLO in Lebanon. It wasn't because of the West Bank.
I have an objection, too, to treatment of some of the Palestinians on the West Bank. The moderate Palestinians who did want to sit down and talk peace and then were assassinated by the non-moderate Arabs, the PLO. And I would like to ask the caller where they ran into all of these tortured...
Now we're going to get a 6-minute explanation, and you weren't there, and she doesn't have any Polaroid.
I've got to make a point,
Yes.
and that is that many of the mayors who were deported, Wilhelm of Halhul, Kawasmi of Hebron, came to the United States, said in a synagogue in Washington, D.C., Temple Sinai. Please let me. The question came up about West Bank Palestinian mayors and moderates who had been killed. There are moderates on the West Bank who were duly elected leaders who came to the United States and said, we recognize the state of Israel in the context of a settlement for the Palestinians.
Let me get the rabbi in here. Just a question for you, Rabbi. Rabbi, you're the president of the Chicago Board of Rabbis. You'll understand our interest in your view, sir, regarding the establishment of a Palestinian state. Can you live with that?
First of all, let me say this. I'll say it fast. I'll say it quickly. First of all, from 1948 to 1967, when Jordan controlled that area, why didn't they establish an independent Arab state?
All right,
They made a mistake.
All right, let's yes. Now, do you what is the rabbi's responsibility today? And which rabbis are speaking out? And how many are still in the closet? And are you concerned about a split congregation that may or may not continue to support?
As far as the split congregation of Jews?
Yes.
I think that all Jews want peace and kindness and happiness for all people.
How about the establishment of a Palestinian state? Rabbi,
Catholics want that.
Can you
a Palestinian state? First of all, I want to say that there is a Palestinian state. 4/5 of Palestine is already existing as an independent Palestine state. It's called Jordan, and from the League of Nations. That's number one.
Phil, why, if we cannot get
only on the 1/5. It's only on the 1/5 that they've been attacked.
You don't like the question.
All right, because there is a process called the Camp David Accords, which
calls for the beginning of discussions leading toward the establishment of an autonomous state for the Palestinians. How do you feel about that?
We should pursue the discussion.
That is not true. Tell me how I'm wrong.
It says that you have 5 years of autonomy leading to the time when the parties in issue, the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Israelis, the Palestinians,
will discuss
sovereignty of the area, not the establishment of a Palestinian state.
We'll be back in just a moment.
Smucker's is doing something new with your favorite fruit. Making each flavor with all the fruit and half the sugar of regular jams and jellies. But no artificial sweeteners. Introducing Smucker's Low Sugar Spreads. Half the sugar and all the good fruit taste. With a name like Smucker's, it has to be good.
Every face is different. So must every hair design be. The designer creating the style understands this. He is Alexandre Ferry. He's personally designed an exciting line for summer-free fun. Short or long, there's only one look. Alexandre Ferry, Fair Oaks Mall.
I am a black woman, the daughter of a dining car waiter. I am a black woman who, even 8 years ago, could not buy a house in some parts of the District of Columbia. Senator, to say I am not by and of and for the people is to show a lack of understanding of who I am and where I came from.
Your answer is that you have no problem with this because you're a black woman.
No, that is not my answer.
Is that right or not? Well, then what is your answer?
My answer, you spoke of the unrepresented and the poor, and I said, I am one of them. By being part of the system, one does not forget what it meant to be outside it. Because I assure you that while there may be others who forget what it meant to be excluded from the dining rooms of this very building, I shall never forget it.
Look, Morris.
Yeah, it's a new low.
Isn't it pretty?
That is totally tacky.
Ready for din-din, sweetie?
This killed my appetite. Maybe forever.
Don't be finicky. It's 9 Live sliced beef and gravy.
Is my appetite recovering?
Juicy, bite-sized beef slices, rich brown gravy.
Sliced beef, unreal.
9 Lives tasty sliced dinners for finicky cats.
Great any way you slice it, 9 Lives.
Is the caller there?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead, briefly, please.
All right, briefly. I'm an American-born Gentile, and I appreciate all of the problems. I appreciate what's gone on for the last 40 years and during World War II, but I am sick and tired of listening to this on American talk shows, the evening news. I know there's a problem, but
you don't want to hear about it.
I'm tired of it.
Good.
Yeah. So what should we do? So there should be no coverage?
Crazy cat.
I don't say there shouldn't be any coverage, but it does have to be on every hour of every day.
Well,
we got some wonderful soap opera we can do at night.
That's an oversimplification.
Yeah, you can't stick your head in the sand. It won't go away. You've got to give some credence to it.
Yeah. What else are you tired of in the news?
What am I tired of in the news?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Sex.
Well, listen, if you want to, it doesn't solve the problem. Why don't you take Bacon and Arafat and stick them in the Colosseum in Rome and let them go at it?
Thank you very much.
Back here, please.
Well, what I'm concerned about, they say support, but I'm a mother of 2 boys, and I don't want my boys over there straightening out your mess.
Well,
excuse me.
That's a very interesting phrase.
It's not your mess, it's our mess.
That's a very interesting phrase.
We're as much
your
Americans
mess
as you
quite
are.
fascinating.
Well,
Anything that goes on anywhere is not your mess.
So,
it's our
in other
mess.
words, but who is our? I mean, we are a very multi-ethnic, multiracial collection of human beings in this country. Does this mean that if something should happen somewhere and I don't happen to identify with that particular nationality, I don't have to go?
I don't want to send my boys over there. Let's put it that Excuse way. me? It's...
You want the PLO over here, she wants it.
No, I believe that if those who feel strongly want to go over there and help out, that's fine. But let's not send the ones who don't want to go.
We're not sending them. Mrs. Dunn, you don't know
As
nothing.
long as our tax dollars support the weapons that go to Israel, we are involved, whether we want to admit it or not.
Not only are we involved with our weapons, but for 10 months there was a ceasefire over that border that Israel and the PLO agreed to that was not broken by the PLO. And Haig let a vacuum go. Haig should have...
Lady, are you on a payroll?
Excuse me, just a moment.
Excuse me, everybody seems to forget one thing. I think that we should neutralize a real force back there. I think all we're beginning we're manipulated by the Russians. They're supplying the Syrians, the PLOs, and if we can only we should neutralize it. And I think that President Reagan...
Neutralize me. What do you want to bomb?
Well, we don't want to bomb. We want to...
How do you neutralize?
Well, Reagan has an idea, and I think that I don't agree with all his programs, but I think that in this idea of trying to neutralize the Russians, I think if we would have peace in the world, they're the fomenters of all the trouble. So we're being manipulated.
Neutralized.
That's the idea. I think we have brains enough here to do anything, and I think
Excuse me.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
How about a United Nations peacekeeping force in there right now, today, and let them go in there and stop the war and the fighting?
Yes, ma'am. Back here.
No, they were there. They didn't do anything for Lebanon.
We've heard so many problems, and I've really become a lot more aware of this problem today, hearing this individually. But what I'm wondering is, do any of the guests have suggestions? I know they don't have answers.
It's a very good question, and I will give him an opportunity to answer your question in just a moment.
Hamburger helpers gone Italian.
Plain hamburgs now become lasagna, yum, yum, yum. Noodles and mild cheese, tomato sauce sure to please. Seasoned authentically to please your family. Hamburger helper makes lasagna with no mistakes.
It's a chore.
I'd like more.
Hamburger helper, hamburger, make a great meal.
Door work.
you've been thinking about getting a beautiful steel door, don't think about it for another second, because right now at Door World, we're holding a half-price sale where you can save an incredible 50% on slightly blemished and canceled MagnaSeal steel doors, plus free installation.
Get a MagnaSeal door for half price. Call 621-4131. This half price for a limited time only. Call now for a free estimate and shop at home service. No obligation.
I don't get it. We make the best tasting potato chips on the market. Man's, right?
Right,
JB. So fresh. So crispy. The most irresistible chips around.
Irresistible.
So answer me this. If Man's is so irresistible, how come we don't make more money?
Man's potato chips.
Something is eating into our profits.
From a whole line of snacks that are irresistible.
I'm going to get to the bottom of this.
If you have an interest in the future of our children and can volunteer at least 4 hours a week, Operation Rescue needs you. Over 800 Washington area residents are needed to tutor elementary school students in reading and mathematics under the supervision of teachers. Operation Rescue is sponsored by the Washington Urban League and the D.C. Public School Systems. For information, call 724-4482.
Why don't you call Kate and see how she's doing?
Oh, she doesn't need to hear from her mother again this week. Anyway, she's probably out with her friends this weekend.
I recall a weekend or two alone when I moved away from home.
Well, I'll try, but I bet she won't be home for hours.
Any night after 11 or weekends till 5 on Sunday. Dial direct and visit up to 20 minutes with anyone in the country for $4.06 or less.
Hello? Mama.
Reach out and touch someone.
All right, solutions. What do we do now? The future. Let's fix this and stop the killing. And what's your best prescription for that?
Well, Phil, a couple weeks into the war, 3 very important Jewish leaders met in Paris. Nahum Goldman, who was president of the World Zionist Organization, Phil Klutznick from this city here in Chicago, who's been president of the World Jewish Congress and also honorary president of B'nai B'rith, and Pierre Mendès France, who'd been the prime minister of France. They made an answer to that question, and I'd just like to give their answer. They said it was imperative that the war stop, the bombardment of Beirut stop, there be Palestinian independence, that there be self-determination for the Palestinians. Now, one can agree with this or not agree with this, but it's important to realize that Jewish leaders of that caliber and that experience have called for it.
Yes, they have, but it's important for you to realize that no less a figure than the president of the Chicago Board of Rabbis apparently cannot give his verbal endorsement to that idea.
He doesn't have to.
Now what?
He doesn't have to.
I'm saying that this rabbi represents a lot of people within
power. The Chicago Board of Rabbis will agree to whatever the government of Israel finally agrees to. And what that means in the final analysis, folks, has to be mutual recognition. You have to create the kind of understructure, foundation, that will enable conflicting parties and opposing parties mutually to recognize each other without losing their own integrity and their own identity. And then you'll begin to have
And no country in the world has spoken so much for what you were just asking for so many years. For mutual recognition, for everybody to sit down peacefully and solve the
But
problem.
the question is, how does the mutual recognition get off the ground? Now the Israelis have now destroyed the military capacity of the PLO. I do not believe they have destroyed the PLO. I don't believe that the Israelis believe that they have destroyed the PLO. And quite frankly, I'm not much interested in what the Chicago Board of Rabbis happens to think about this subject.
Why, Rabbi?
All right?
Why wouldn't
I am very much interested in taking what remains, the remnant that remains of the political factions of the PLO, which still happen to represent the Palestinians, at least in the Palestinians' mind.
Who says that they represent the Palestinians? They
Why
do
would a
not.
rabbi give the back of his hand to the Chicago Board of Rabbis that way? If you don't, you can use them. You can use them. If you don't have them, you've got a problem.
I don't think that we have to be concerned about any board of rabbis. We have to be concerned now about resolving a tension between the government of Israel, and the government of Israel is going to have to do this, plus the help of the American government and any other element that can play that role.
I have a question. It seems to me that it is possible, that a solution is possible right now, but that with the world watching, with this massive media event going on, that both sides are gambling on getting more than they can get right now. Is that possible?
Well, that may be possible, but you know, we haven't even focused on what the U.S. government is doing. I came from Washington this morning. It's interesting that many people have concluded in Washington that this is, in fact, a moment where progress could be made, and there is an attempt being made to pursue some form of mutual recognition.
Running out of time. May I present another rabbi? Yes, your feeling is?
And ironically, vice president of the Chicago Board of Rabbis. And I'm generally supportive of what what your guests are saying, and I'll tell you why. It's not that that Israel's the bad guy, and that the PLO is looked at in any kind of enamored kind of way. But there's a serious issue here. The Jewish community is being forced into a position of appearing as hardliners, and they're really not. There's great division within the Jewish community on behalf of peace and compromise and Palestinian homeland, if not actually a state, but some kind of homeland and entity.
The division is personified here between the president and vice president.
What happens is, because Jews fear a tremendous amount of ignorance within the general American community, and apathy is expressed by some of the comments, that they feel they have to band together and close ranks, even though within the Jewish community we do express our divisions quite readily.
So you're saying that a Jew then is less likely to be vocal and public with regard to misgivings than someone else for fear of presenting?
Well, I'm saying the bleachers here, many of whom seem to be very supportive of all of Israel's actions, are doing it publicly because they feel it's necessary to show that kind of unity. But there is great. Wait, let me finish. But there is great. I think something that has not been brought out, that there is a great sense of sadness and despair over the deaths in Lebanon. Not necessarily over the initial 25-mile incursion. I would say that there's a good amount of agreement within the Jewish community of the necessity to stop the shelling in southern Lebanon.
Well, why don't we have more vocal...
How about the treasurer? Okay?
You're the treasurer of the Chicago Board of Rabbis? Stand up, Sir Walter.
Yes. Okay.
Where are you on this thing?
I am firmly in support of Israel's actions, and we just point out, as a great provocateur, this panel does reflect a segment, but a small fringe of the American Jewish community, just as I think...
A small fringe of the American Jewish community is upset by the bombing of Lebanon?
Not upset. I'm talking about relative to Israel's position.
Right. Can you sit still for the possibility of a Palestinian state?
Yes, I can.
So you separate yourself then from...
Yes.
But you
and I don't think Rabbi Smith said that.
Rabbi, you haven't given us
I say that if it were possible for the West Bank originally was what they agreed to a West Bank state.
Okay.
We must have peace. We must have kindness. We must have understanding. We must have living in peace with each other. That's all it's. And the PLO did not permit that up to this point.
We'll be back in just a moment. Thank you.
The hardest thing I ever had to do was pick up that phone and call Care Unit. My husband's an alcoholic. It took me a long time to admit that, and I knew he'd never admit it, so I called Care Unit because they've treated so many alcoholics so successfully. My husband was very angry that I called, but now he thanks me for it.
Call Care Unit for the treatment of alcoholism and drug abuse. Call now.
The 1980 election that began one era ended another. One that started back before the 70s, before the 60s, back before Khrushchev or credit cards. It was 1954. Tom Dewey was governor of New York. Polio vaccine was just being tested. And the Democrats began 26 straight years in control of Congress. Over those years, the cost of living went up 220%. The national debt went up 230%. Federal spending went up 750%. Finally, in 1980, after all those spend now, pay later years, the American people said no.
The economic ills we suffer have come upon us over several decades. They will not go away in days, weeks, or months, but they will go away.
People are still hurting, but we've made a new beginning now under a new president. It'll take time, but it'll work, and we're not about to turn back.
On the next Couples.
I've just been lying so long that I don't know how to really stop.
Coral is 10 years old. She's bright and adorable, but she simply can't tell the truth.
I just lie too much about things.
Her mom doesn't know what to do.
It's like I can't ask her anything and feel like I'm going to get the truth anymore.
Coral wants to stop lying, but old habits are hard to break. Couples.
Weeknights at 11:30 on Channel 9. If you're at the end of your rope and need sound legal advice at fees you can afford, there's a legal clinic of Gary Gallo near you. Call the legal clinics of Gary Gallo at 933-7337.
Hi, I am not a member of the Board of Rabbis. I am a peon in the Jewish community. I support Israel totally, although I am, as a Jew, very concerned with saying that I am confused and saying that I don't always support their moves at the moment.
You're saying you are. It's easy for you to express your disappointment.
It's very hard to.
Why?
I don't want to
appear to be disloyal.
I don't want to be misunderstood.
Well, that's exactly the problem many Americans had about the Vietnam War, and it took us 57,000 dead young men to get out of it.
I don't think anyone supports the killing. I certainly don't.
I'm
just okay.
All right, but isn't it? You know, if it's true that Jews feel hesitant to speak out, then Jews will always be deprived of the full energy of their own citizenship.
That's quite
and democracy and all those good things that we learned about in. Yeah.
I don't blame her for being confused because the media and the press is a mess, really. They're showing Arafat as a good papa, holding children when he was killing hundreds and thousands of Lebanese children for the last 7 years.
This is what I wanted to bring out. Where was the world sentiment when all these things were happening, not only to the Israelis, but even to the Lebanese, when they took a church and made a latrine out of it and desecrated it?
Thank you
the PLO.
Hang on just a moment. Excuse me. You have no microphone. What is it, please? You've been here for the whole hour and we haven't heard from you.
I'm Syrian and I'm sick and tired every time 100 Syrians can be killed. It's a little blurb on page 85, and if it's one Jew, it's headline news. And I want to know what my relatives over there in Syria have done to this country that we should be taking sides against them all the time. None of us can talk. This yellow dog press we've got in this country.
The Syrians were
Yellow dog.
Lebanese. I want you to know.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, there's universities.
Jewish history is full of miracles. Where's your faith in your Lord, who is your greatest ally
So what
throughout?
should they do? Pray then, huh?
Unite and pray. The Lord has proved that over and over again.
The problem is the other side is praying too. That's one of, God's up there.
The same Lord.
God promised them.
We can hardly call religion a peaceful or calming factor in these disputes. Hi.
In answer to our Syrian friend, the Syrians have no right to be in Lebanon. Their arms have been supplied by the Russians, top quality, and it's put an extra burden on the Israelis.
Let's give equal coverage regarding the killings and the massacre.
Doesn't she make a point that yeah, it is true.
The Syrians were responsible for killing the people of Damour, the Christian village of Damour. They were responsible for killing our people.
Back here, please. Please, may I have it just for a moment? I beg your indulgence.
It seems to me that the world in general is just reaching the point of saying we don't care who's right and wrong. We're just tired of nations killing each other.
I disagree. I think what we've done is we've got ourselves a world in which people are suffering not from a lack of love, but from too much devotion. And we've got pockets of humanity blind in its self-righteousness. And as long as I feel I've got God, and that I've been aggrieved, and somebody has killed my relatives, and who can't tell a story like that? I might be able to get myself emotionally capable of shooting you. And then I'll organize it, and we'll get uniforms for all those boys. We'll get some hardware from the United States, and here we go again. And you know who suffers? The children. And when you look at the babies, I mean, all babies are beautiful. Why? I don't want to sound lofty here. Why wouldn't that move you too?
I think the time to end on a note of hope is what has occurred in the last few days. It seems to me now will be the test of the goodwill, the love that Rabbi Smith spoke about, the sentiments even echoed by the panelists this morning, to look ahead.
Wouldn't this be a time for Jews of influence in this country and around the world to stand up and say, you're never ever, nobody's asking you to kneel, and you have every right to call our attention to the history of Jews and the Holocaust, But now is the time to end this.
And Phil,
Let's
where
talk
is the rest
and
of
let's
the
give the Palestinians an opportunity for their own.
Let's give everybody.
If the Palestinians are going to say all we're interested in is the destruction of Israel, who do you talk to?
But it's not fair for you to say that that's what all Palestinians are saying.
PLO. If the PLO is out, there's a chance for doing something, and that's the whole point.
Okay, the PLO is an umbrella organization which represents a wide variety of political viewpoints. There are people within the PLO who should be talked to who have indicated that they want to.
Who's going to decide who those people
The last thing is that the Palestinians recognize that the PLO is their legitimate leader. Whether Americans do or not, so what? The Palestinians have a government and
No way. Absolutely no way. He thinks they're terrorists, they kill babies, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with them.
Why? I mean, in America, we have elected officials, and we don't get other governments saying that those aren't our legitimate leaders.
And the British were known to say some pretty nasty things about us, too, during the American Revolution. We'll be back in just a minute.
No matter which of these stomach remedies you take for gas, pain, and pressure symptoms, we'll prove Gas X tablets break up painful gas bubbles better and faster. Watch. Intestinal gas bubbles are much like bubbles in beer. Add one of those stomach remedies here, Gas X here. 1 minute later, stomach remedy shows little change, but Gas X breaks the gas bubbles. They're almost gone. For fast relief, get Gas X, the 100% gas reliever.
It's almost showtime backstage at the theater, and in exactly 18 minutes the curtain goes up on the musical that won every award Broadway ever invented, Annie. When the overture begins and house lights dim, the magic happens. This is theater, real live people and one live dog just waiting for you. Just go see Annie in person and see for yourself.
Annie's coming home to the Kennedy Center. All children half price. Call 857-0900.
Need quick, dependable plumbing service? Call Johnny Be Quick. For a same-day replacement of your old hot water heater or a gas conversion for your oil furnace, call Johnny Be Quick. No matter what the job, from leaky faucets to replacement of all pipes, call Johnny Be Quick. Need your bathroom remodeled? Or your kitchen redone? Call Johnny Be Quick. For quick roto-cleaning of your drains or sewers, call Johnny Be Quick. For all your plumbing needs, call Johnny Be Quick. 277-6969. 277-6969. Serving Maryland, D.C., and Virginia.
After years of research, a new formula super glue called Bondini 2 has proven effective at bonding both porous and non-porous surfaces. It was 1977 when Bondini stunned the glue world with its incredible holding power. Today, Bondini 2 demonstrates that same awesome strength even when bonding through oil and grease or on leather, vinyl, and fabric. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is new.
Available at Drug Fair and Peoples.
Go for the tough one. Try out for the varsity, the few, the proud, the Marines.
With sincere gratitude to all of you who participated in a very complicated issue on a platform that's not necessarily the best. It's truncated and it's difficult, but we thank you all very, very much, and we share your hope and your prayer that we will find a resolution. We owe it to our children to solve this. And I thank you and hope you have a nice day.
Services provided and promotional fees paid by the following.
Now there's even one more thing that goes into a Volvo that lasts a long time. Announcing the Volvo Diesel.
Super scrubbable True Test Easy Care Latex flat wall and trim finish. Perfect for both walls and woodwork. Sold only by True Value hardware stores and home centers.